My name is David Bennett, and I'm here in Sälen. As you may have heard, if you understand Swedish, we're a little bit delayed on the journey here, otherwise it would have been here from the beginning. If you've been here in previous years, you will perhaps recognize me. This is the fourth year I'm holding the reins of the digital meeting once we get going, after towards fantastic work with organizing pretty much everything. We'll go straight into Thomas Wallgren for this last session now until 8 o'clock. And the session, Thomas Wallgren from Finland, professor in philosophy. He's a member of the advisory council of the Corporate Europe Observatory, and also engaged with, I'm going to say this in Finnish because not. Ystävät.
Very good.
In Finland. So on the board for Ystävät in Finland, as well as the Advisory Council of Corporate Europe Observatory and professor of philosophy. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Thomas, to the introduction?
I just want to say I'm happy to see you all, and I'm sad I couldn't make it to the location to Sälen. I was there once, and it was wonderful, and it's always much better to meet in person. So next year, I hope.
That would be great. So you'll be talking for 30, 40 minutes perhaps about the EU at the crossroads between war and peace in a changing world order. So if you'd like to get your questions ready while Thomas is speaking, then we'll come to those after 30 or 40 minutes.
Yeah, maybe David, I can suggest that I'll because I have we might also consider to take a pause after the more specific EU things, and then see whether that will where people feel like discussing. So then I'll break the presentation halfway and we discuss more on the EU specifics.
All right.
Because I have it covers more ground than the EU, so that's one option.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah, sounds like a good idea. So I've got a presentation that you've prepared, and you'll just have to give a little nod or a word.
Okay.
When you want to change the page.
So thanks. I'll do that. But very happy to be here. I think some of the things maybe are trivial, but I also want to record, to have a common platform that there's in the perception in the Nordic countries, in EU, and maybe I think also in the USA, there's a growing insight about things which have been more obvious to people active in movements than to most people who are in the lead in our countries, and most people who are not so engaged in social movements. One is to take the war issue first, the perception of the Ukraine war, where the frantic insistence on winning the war, on Ukraine winning the war, that's very dangerous rhetoric, is no longer in vogue in the same way as it was. There's kind of realism that those some illusions are no longer upkept in the same way as before. It's one case is the Ukraine war, but I think the more serious illusions which is falling. I mean, when we look at what happens in Greenland, when we look at what happens in Venezuela, when we look at what happens also within the EU, there's the idea that we had a path to some kind of that politics as usual could save us from the crisis which we see coming in terms of ecological crisis and the post-modern world war, geopolitical conflict, refugees, etc., the risks of technology. So you see the loss of illusion across the board, and I think that is something which is, of course, important for any positive change to be possible. That we must get rid of those illusions which have prevailed and won elections, have won the hearts and minds of people during the last decades. So I think that is that's the trivial observation, but I also think it's very important because it creates opportunities for us, people like us and social movements who have larger aspirations and deeper aspirations than the ones which have been prevailing. So it gives opportunity and responsibility, and I'm not saying we're well prepared for it, but I'm saying we should take ourselves seriously. We've been in the margin, or people have seen us as marginalized, and we're less marginal in people's minds, in the minds of other people than before. So we have to mobilize, we have to stand up, we have to rise to the moment, but we must. So this is in a way a dire situation, which I think we all feel that we have responsibility, and I'm not sure that we will be able, and we shouldn't think we must be able to deliver quickly. So that is the first observation I want to make. I also want to say that it's not the only crisis of the West, because the West is global, and I think people we are still preoccupied, at least in Finland, we're still preoccupied with the downfall of democracy in the US. We're preoccupied with the weakness of the European Union, that I don't think we always perceive how similar the developments are in, to mention the obvious countries, in China, Russia, and India. Russia is still worse shape than it was some years ago. The internal repression is harsher than it was a few years ago. It's more difficult for the opposition. People are in jail, and it's very difficult to stand up. The same is true of China. And China is also, because China finds difficulty in upkeeping its internal cohesion, the state finds difficulty in keeping up its legitimacy and people's trust. So China is becoming more, also compensating with becoming more aggressive in its international rhetoric. So China is doing the same way. And in India, I don't know if everybody is aware, but the modern regime in India is increasingly fascist, and the repression of activists and people like us is increasingly severe. I had great difficulty in getting visa. I'm going there this spring, but friends, when I ask for visa, friends who have been central to Indian politics tell me now that I can't mention them in my visa application because I will never get the visa. I don't get visa for anything which involves political activities, not even for academic activities. Only so I mean, it's just anecdotal, but the fact is that India is in bad shape now, and we all see what happens, and that the more tragic thing is how the competition, the person in World War we used to have fossil capitalism. Now we also have fossil capitalism and rare earth capitalism, rare earth metal capitalism, and we see the implications for Africa, especially Sudan, but the whole stretch of Africa from Somalia to Mali, well, I will try to describe. But it's very sad, and it's very sad also how little our countries have been able to understand and stand up and do things. So I recall this as there's a lot of illusion. which creates opportunities and responsibility, and we have to take that very seriously. That's my first observation. And we can go to the next slide, I suppose. Maybe I already passed it over. This was the... Yeah, maybe I want to mention, before I go to the European Union specifically, I want to mention, because we are in Sälen and I'm in Finland, and I do think one of the big opportunities we have is to reclaim the always partly, it was always partly fantasy, but the fantasy also had some element of reality. The fantasy of the Nordics as a benign force in the relations between the civilizations, in the relations between East and West, in the relations between North and South. So this fantasy, which also had some real life, I think this fantasy can and should be revived today. And that's one dimension of work we might meet around concretely. And one interesting thing there is also to see whether our friends in Eastern Europe and other parts of the world agree, whether people like me who want to reclaim Europe as a different part of the modern West, whether people are so fed up and whether they think this is just one identification by activists who don't have better ideas. But I mean, on paper, we have lost Nordics. And that was a very, very grim defeat that we had in 2024 and 2025. When Finland and Sweden joined NATO, such a catastrophic change of direction. And it happened exactly on the day of the downfall of the transatlantic alliance and the downfall of the lots of illusions of Western supremacy and significance in the world. So the critical theorist Theodor Adorno used to speak after the Second World War about modernity in Augenblick des Sturzes, at the time of the downfall. So Nordics joined, and it's really amazing, isn't it? That just a year ago, when was the exact date, when Finland and Sweden created these defense cooperation agreements with the US. In Finland, the bill to join this bilateral defense cooperation agreement with the US was passed without a vote. One member of parliament was against, but there's no vote with only one member being against. Now, I think lots of people will see this was the only sensible, one of the craziest agreements Finland has ever committed to. So this is, the change is very abrupt. And again, I just want to report trivially, I suppose, but share with you my sense that things are moving very fast, and that creates opportunities and responsibilities. That was my first point. Let me go to the EU slide and see whether I can be a bit more specific there. Yeah, well, so the upshot of the first part is that most people experience a sense of chaos because of the things we all know. The first effect of the chaos, people are afraid, people turn their back on common affairs, and people want cheap and easy solutions. But the big thing which is happening right now is, I think, that those cheap solutions are being unmasked as false solutions. So this is the amazing thing. I mean, and I want we can discuss. You see my you see my bullet points here, but I think we don't need to spend much time on them. I just want to stress the absurdity of the solutions offered. And I think it will be difficult for those in power to maintain people's trust when they claim that 5% to arms is the way to peace, when they claim that nuclear wars can be won, when they claim that artificial intelligence will be good for mankind and nature, when they claim that green transition will solve the environmental problems. I think these claims are dismantled, that they are losing their what is it? That the people are seeing through the hollowness of these, the emptiness of these promises. And that is, of course, not only an opportunity, it's also dangerous because you can compensate for your lack of vision by war. War is attractive because the energy unleashed, because so we know that. So that's the danger. Okay, let's go to the more specific things about the EU, and I'll turn the slide. Here, I want to the B part, the agnostic remarks on the European Union, I think are a bit important before I go to specifics about EU politics. The official identity of the EU since 1950s, early 1950s, and maybe late 1940s, is that the EU was a pragmatic and a solution to the crisis of Europe that Europe experienced the Second World War, driven by idealistic ambition. The idea that the EU was a peace project has given and continues to give EU a lot of its appeal and its legitimacy. So this was the Schuman-Monet recipe for European integration, that you pick from political theories, political philosophy of war and peace. We pick one aspect. Also, we put one aspect from Immanuel Kant's pivotal essay on eternal peace. You claim that market integration, or this interdependence of the industries and productivity of the nations, that this interdependence and that is created through market integration, through a single market, as called market freedom, they call it, that this market integration will bring peace. So this has been the promise, the ultimate promise of the EU, and it was very important in the early 1950s and after the Second World War, and it has remained important. And it is a good thing that people want peace. Now, what was always forgotten and became obvious around the debate of the Lisbon Treaty 20 years ago, what became obvious there was that the European project lacked the second and the most fundamental element that you need for building peace, and that was trust in people and democracy. So the fundamental claim of Kant's essay of eternal peace, and the fundamental claim of political philosophy to understand the dynamics of war and peace is that people don't war. So if the ones who will suffer from the war decide about war and peace, that is normal, ordinary people, then we'll have less war. So EU was the people who founded, the fathers of the EU, were convinced that the peoples of France and Germany were suspect that if you give power to the people, then they will create war. This was the false diagnosis of the war they had. And therefore they created a technocratic rule in the EU. EU is fundamentally anti-people. It's built on mistrust of the people. And that's why we have and continue to have the so-called democracy deficit of the European Union. And this has been there since the 1950s and it continues to be there. So EU is a technocratic regime which has been built on the idea that market solutions, and in combination with authoritarian state rule, so authoritarian capitalism, that authoritarian capitalism will give us peace and prosperity. Now we see that EU gives neither peace nor prosperity. So this is how the EU project, the very core of the EU project is unraveling before our eyes in a big way. And that is a new thing. That's a historical novelty, which, of course, it doesn't happen overnight. But I think more people will be more awake to this perception of the EU that I here propose than would have been 10 or 20 years ago. So I wanted to say this about the identity of the EU, and I want to say a few more specifics about how this shift in the fundamental sort of idea of Europe, how it plays out in real politics. I think I have 4 points about that. Where did I put them? Yeah, here. Well, one is this new some critical awareness of the trouble with the foundations of the EU project comes together with an awakening to the loss of the significance of Europe in world politics. Again, not a very new idea to mention, but still it is important that we recognize the sense of crisis among the leaders of the EU when they have to admit the weakness of the project seen from abroad and also the weakness of the core of the project, which was supposed to bring peace. Meanwhile, this weakening EU has recently claimed one traditional success, the Mercosur trade agreement between EU and Latin America. It's interesting that mainstream social democrats have, which have been sort of the balancing force between people like us and the moderate right, and usually taken the side with the moderate right and the far right. The social democrats, is my second point, are in the Mercosur case committed to politics as usual. They think, oh, trade agreements are good, they will make you stronger in the world, so let's go for Mercosur. There's some problems with environment and some problems with farms, whatever. But on the overall, Mercosur cooperation will give the EU standing in the world, so that will be a good thing for the European project. But the other part, which is dominating EU politics, and also, of course, the social democratic and also the left, has been in favor of militarization. The militarization of the EU as a part of the solution to not only the war in Ukraine, but the geopolitical competition. So there we have the old coalition in place with the center left and the moderate right, and also the far right, a bit more divided, but still, this is where they have agreed. Interestingly, there's a split if you look at the European Parliament and look at the Commission, on the question of deregulation or market fundamentalism, we have a split. We have the social democratic left waking up to the dangers to labor rights, to social welfare, and of course also to the environment of deregulation. So there I think we can see promises of in short-term real politics, we can see a promise of gaining ground in cooperation with getting a green left social movement forces to be better equipped to fight the crazy radical market fundamentalism, which the Commission implements under the name of deregulation. So those are, and the last observation I want to make on the EU is that that we have in almost all the Nordic countries, in Germany, in France, in Britain, in Italy, of course in Italy, many countries in EU, the Berlusconi coalition is dominating politics. I mean, Berlusconi was a genius, is a genius the last 30, 40 years in politics. Berlusconi created the political coalition, the effortless coalition with the moderate right and the far right. Where whatever the moderate right wants to achieve in terms of destroying the achievements of the environment movement, and destroying the achievements of the labor movement, and destroying the achievements of social democratic compromise. All the radical shifts towards authoritarian capitalism that the moderate right wants and always wanted, all that they can now do with the support of the far right, and we blame the far right, always the far right who is to blame for all these bad things we are doing. We don't want these bad things, but we have to do it because otherwise the far right will take power. No, it's bullshit. It is I mean, we have a beautiful case in Finland with a coalition with far right and moderate right and liberal parties. And they all say, oh, we want to respect human rights, but we can't because of the far right, and we want this and that, we can't because of the far right. So this coalition between the dirty coalition between far right and moderate right, where the moderate right can hide behind the face of the far right and do the dirty work. This coalition is in place also in the European Parliament, but there we see also how it lacks stability, and this is I don't make the observation. I don't know what to do with it, but it has proven a bit more difficult than people expected to keep the far right together. We see it in the maybe most dramatic in relation to Russia and the Ukraine, but also in other cases. So the far right as coalition partner can be more easily handled nationally, but at the European level we see that the stability of the moderate right far right coalition is not so secure. So I think therefore we see also a volatility in the European prospect, which I want to record, which I see as again giving us responsibility and opportunity, but also as creating danger. But it is true that with far right in even stronger positions, it will be the danger that people will go to war instead of preserving dignity for all. That danger is stronger. And I want to give space for discussion here, because if I continue now, I just want to report that the next part that I prepared will be just to present my basic tools for diagnosing and understanding the current malaise, the current shifts. There I would go back 500 years or at least 100 years and see why I think that the modern Western project, what is the quality of the cultural crisis which unfolds as war and as rise of far right, etc. But I'll leave that because it may be more interesting to discuss and meet with friends than to listen to me for the 20 minutes. Thank you so much. Thanks for organizing. I'm here. I just shut the door.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Thomas, for that. A great introduction. run through of some of the things that are happening in the world and why EU now stands actually at the crossroads between war and peace. We do have the choice, and as you said, I thought that the non-democratic ways of deciding in Sweden and Finland for NATO DCA. The politicians have chosen for us the path of getting closer to the US. Sorry, there's an echo. I don't know if it's coming from. Did you change something in the?
Maybe I'm unmuting myself.
Okay. Was there more that John? Did you hear the echo as well? Just wondering what the fixer unit comment is about. That looks like vigorous head nodding, but you're kind of...
Jag hörde det och det är inte bra.
Okay. Good. Now it's okay though. Yeah, so EU's at the crossroads, and if the politicians get to decide, then they sort of seem to take us into a more warlike stance, closer to the US. And as you said, Thomas, you know, the West is global. What is the West? I mean, we exported violent colonization, settler colonization to the US. They took it then after the end of the Second World War, the collapse of the British Empire and many of the other sort of Central European empires. The violent exploitation that began in Europe, that the American empire has taken on, is now crumbling. And the only thing, you know, as you said, Thomas, that it was the growth, the economic growth. You know, if we could make the pie bigger all the time, then we could pretend to be friends. But in that pretense of being friends, then, you know, we sought for false solutions. You know, in the EU, which was all market based, and we didn't work on building trust. The trust was eroded because, you know, we thought we could just like partner with each other in terms in economic terms, and that would somehow bring us closer together as brothers and sisters. And what we're seeing now is when the pie hasn't been growing, except on debt-based and technological oil fixes in North America, you know, the pie, everything's falling apart. And we're seeing that now. So, I mean, it's just so true that we do. What do we do now? Some people are saying Europe is a backwater. We're being left behind. We've got no natural resources. All the riches of Europe, you know, they came from colonies around the world. So we really do have the choice now to choose between if we continue with the sort of going towards the US and keeping on with this violent exploitation of the world as the West, or if we come back to some kind of original European project. And I don't quite know what that is. But Thomas, please.
Yeah, I think I just want to comment on and add to the question about trust, and that's something we might search for in politics. I mean, it is a fact of political history that the European project, as it was called, was built on mistrust. It was fundamentally built on the idea we can't trust people. We have to build on people's interests. So people must have an interest, a selfish interest in the European project. That would be the only way to make it succeed. Now, this interest-driven politics is actually also at the basis, I mean, very clearly so, at the basis of Modi's success in India. It is the promise of serving the selfish interest, the greed of the persons entering the consumer market. That is the basis for the legitimacy of Maoist India. It's also the base for the legitimacy of the Chinese Communist Party today. So in this sense, I mean, I think that is the fundamental point that I'm interested if people disagree, but this is the convergence that we see unfolding between the EU and the US and China and India. And I'm afraid also that even Brazil is on that same path. And the interest-driven politics, if interest, the self-interest, the promise of consumer price is the basis of the political project, then it is very vulnerable to not meeting the expectations. And it's also very, very dependent on delivering cheap energy from oil. Now it is the green transition. And if it can't deliver on the green transition promise, then the thing is really, and we see it falling apart. Which is the tragedy of Korea. I mean, the project was, from the point of view of human dignity and morality, it was always rotten at the core. You can't build life on self-interest. That's not a life. It's very difficult to defend that as a dream for ordinary people, but it was the basis for the political project. And in the last, I mean, in Europe, especially so after the Second World War, but it was there in nucleus, it was there ever since the 1850s. And this is, so it is a civilizational crisis or collapse which is unfolding. And it's difficult to live in times of collapse. But who came here, it's also, I mean, we can also take, not pleasure, but we can take pride in trying to stand up to this moment. And I want to mention, I see David's face here, as the other friends. I think there's two parts of our work which we need to deepen the respect for each other. One is all those people who do what my Latin American friends call prefigurative work, which we used to call, what was the word we used in? But the self-sufficiency or the sufficiency movement, where people like us want to show in their daily life the possibility for decoupling from satanic capitalism or from authoritarian capitalism and live a world today in which the dreams we have are made real. So that's what the Latin Americans call prefigurative politics. It is very important. It's not a mass movement at the moment, but it is extremely inspiring. I think that the worse the situation in the world is, the more necessary it is to keep up these often difficult struggles for dignity without the consumer, outside the consumer side. And that's one thing. The other thing is the necessity of mass organization. I think it was an insight of the labor movement or the workers' movement of the 19th century and early 20th century, that we have to organize, and that there's a kind of aspect of turning away from mainstream society, and there might even be an individualistic aspect sometimes, not in all forms, but some forms of the sufficiency movement. So I think we need to see how dependent also those movements which realize those radical experiments with ourselves, which are necessary for decoupling, that these movements, how necessary it is for us to stand together with those who spend time on what my Indian friends call donkey work, the unselfish, anonymous work to organize, mass organize, and that's for me one key. And I have practical ideas on that in that regard, which I can share if you like. But I just wanted to mention the strategic perspective that we appreciate the efforts of people of different kinds, how much we need each other, and how much we are needed today. We're more needed than ever. Yeah. So this is also, sorry, that was a comment to David. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, the self-sufficiency movement, absolutely. And as we're exploring here in Sweden, the community sufficiency movement in Sweden, known as Matvan, or even transition towns, and the mass organization, absolutely.
Very good.
The invisible work that a lot of people are doing in just inviting people, come and do this, come and do this, come and help me. And so asking for help. Lars Drake, you've had your hand up for a while now, please.
Yeah. What you said, David, about colonialism and so on, and we got a lot of sort of income or profit in Europe and then United States. It's very important, but I think there's another thing that is more important for this capacity. Economic capacity we've had in the West, and it's development of knowledge and in the field of industry. So we have used energy, which is not labor, capacity for a person or a horse or something. It's more advanced, and they've built industrial societies which have made a lot of money. And now, what is happening now is that the China, India, other countries are using cheap labor, and they got access to this kind of knowledge and have also developed it. So the big change now, I think, is that the knowledge that was only existed in European countries and United States, and then later also in Japan and so on, is now generally spread over the world, and especially in China. And they have cheaper labor, which makes it unprofitable to continue with classical industrial production in United States, and we are sort of losing. That is probably the most important factor. And I don't really have a solution to that, other than that we will see what happens in the future, near future. I mean, we're going to see more of this kind of change. And up till now, we've had this. The major change has been in China, but the most important changes right now are actually in other countries in the South. Thank you.
Thank you. Thomas, would you like to address that? Maybe we can bring in some thoughts about AI and knowledge development.
I think the technology issue has somehow, just to develop that topic, I have a concept called the hysterical modernity. I mentioned, and I think it remains true, that in China and EU and most countries, political leaders earn their power from promises of delivering in terms of consumption opportunities, in terms of economic growth, etc., etc. I also think, and this is a bit speculative, but I think it's growing before our eyes, that the people or the leaders we have, the political leaders, are more.
Sorry, you froze for a second there. I want you to just repeat that last piece.
Okay. The hysterical modernity I see unfolding. The point I want to make is the following. The old legitimacy basis, which was just consumer paradise, when that is weakening, I think we see a shift towards a different kind of promise, a promise that the technology we see unfolding, and people, the fantasies of artificial intelligence and the fantasies of what the new technology will bring, those fantasies are fantasies of a world in which even the consumer paradise is no longer the picture of the future. we no longer dream of the affluent life with swimming pools and cars. The dream is becoming more phantasmagoric. It's becoming more abstract. And the problem is, we have the Elon Musks and those people who say, we're going to conquer space. We're going to do something which is completely unforeseen. You can't even imagine it, because we can deliver a future which is so radically different from what we have now, that all in dreams even will be old-fashioned tomorrow. So give power to us, and we invest in a future which brings us to the unknown. And that was also, if you look at the history of modern art, it always promised to deal with the completely new. So if you can't deliver the old new, then you promise the completely new. And that is the sort of the last refuge, or the last basis of power for those who now cling to power on the old basis of technology and knowledge. So in that sense, I think there's a shift in what the implications of investment in knowledge are, what drives those investments. So you must say it's becoming more crazy than before. But it was an old dream of the modern world that things would be completely different, and they are creating or fulfilling that desire in very dangerous ways.
Yeah, completely different, but I mean, in many ways the same, in that it's just sort of exploitation and separation of people from nature, and objectifying everything in order to rape and pillage, both literally and metaphorically. But I'd like to pull on a couple of threads that I've noted. The fantasy of AI. You mentioned earlier the fantasy of the Nordics.
Yeah.
To sort of just expand on that, what do you see as the fantasy of the Nordics that has been spread? Where did that come from?
Well, I suppose it was partly the success part of the Nordic experiments from 1850 to 1970. The success part was that there was an idea that mass society could provide security and provide basic care for the basic needs, and also educational and higher needs for people. There was an experience that this dream was being realized, and that was not. It was a dream that had a very real basis, that people did go to school, people did get better lives. Now, the fantasy was, which was based on this real experience, was people organize and work together on building these big organizations, building this the big machine of social welfare state, that this could be globalized. Now, thanks to this idea, the Nordics thought they had a better vision for the world than what the colonizing nations Europe had, and there was a benign aspect of the dream. Now, it was always built on the false idea of what was called sustainable development, that the Nordic dream could be universalized without qualitative change in the Nordic dream. So there had to be solidarity with affluence, and now we're going to have less promise for affluence and more need for solidarity. But still, there was a nucleus in the Nordic project that people working together, that there was a democratic idea, aspiration, and there was an idea that people stand together and share. Now, these ideas were coupled with this impossible growth project, which is coming to an end. But we can all, in all traditions, you have to try when change is necessary. There's some things you can aspire to maintain, and others you can try to leave behind. So that is what I'm trying to say.
Is there something that you see that we need to get back to, that the Nordics had, that Europe had before, that perhaps could act as a part of a vision or a North Star that we can kind of use to guide us in our choices?
Well, I suppose, one thing I do think is true that that the common security idea, that there was something true in the Olof Palme ideas of how to build global peace. It was an idea which was not built on market integration. It was built on understanding each other's view of the world and trying to take the interests and aspirations of everyone seriously. So there was an idea that we need to meet on a par, and we need to respect the UN Charter. I mean, the UN Charter has many beautiful aspects. So I'm not saying that we needed Nordics Olof Palme, but the Olof Palme doctrine of common security, I think, built on was a further development of the best parts, some of the best parts of the UN Charter. Now, I'm not saying that the Nordics will, that the Nordic dream of the Nordic can play a very large role, but we can play a role in presenting ourselves, understanding ourselves as an opportunity for building a different kind of a modern West than we have in the EU. And the deeper the crisis in the EU, the more space will there be for building between the Nordic countries to try to build on those traditions of Nordic cooperation, and also Nordic cooperation with the Global South, which has now been weakened during the last years. So I do think that's a sort of real political opportunity. I don't want to make it too big. It's not that I think this will solve all the problems, but I do think it's something which will be more attractive in Nordics and in other countries. And one thing I want to mention is that I also think this is the thing we need to test to see this kind of aspiration in our countries, also the aspirations of the community sufficiency movement, to see them to have dialogue with our friends in the Global South, movements in Global South about these matters. It's very, very crucial for our self-confidence and also for insight into our strategy. So that's why I want to mention at least once in our conversation today, the World Social Forum and its meeting in Benin in August. I do think that if some of us can go to or be part of the World Social Forum in Benin and meet the African, especially West African movements there, and see their perception in that continent in crisis, to see what they want to achieve from themselves, for themselves, and by themselves, and what role we can play there. If we can understand that better and be inspired by that, I think it will strengthen our morale and our vision very, very deeply. So that's one thing I look with great hope towards during this coming year.
That would be a wonderful opportunity to go to Benin and hear from firsthand some of the things that are happening there that we otherwise can only read about. 8 minutes to go. If there's any questions from the audience, then please put your hand up or write them in the chat. Otherwise, I'll just keep going with my questions, which there are a lot.
Let me ask a question to you guys. One thing which is problematic in many countries, in the US is one, and Finland is another, and we're not the only ones, is the polarization and the felt and the false opposition between people who vote for far right and people who are mobilized for peace movement and environment movement and social rights movements, the trade union movement. So I think I have this dream that we go door knocking, that the environment and solidarity activists and trade union activists, that we join hands and we stop all campaigning and we knock all doors in our countries. In Finland, I've counted, if we have 10,000 people, we could knock 3,000 doors a year. I calculated the amount of work we need. And we knock all doors in Finland. We don't do any campaign. We don't claim that we have the solutions. We go and ask people if we're there. I mean, David mentioned helping each other. We go and say, people, we are here to have a chat. We are here to do something together, to walk your dog, or or help you with cleaning your apartment, and we can talk a bit. And we leave the bubble. So we are all, the bubble phenomenon is dangerous. And I would think it's wonderful if people who work on refugees, people who work on environment, people who work on forests, people who work on trade unions, people who work on protecting disabled or different abled, if all of us would join in a campaign not to change society but to understand society. And we spent 2 years on that, and just go out and meet people and talk and learn. It's in a way it's a Gandhian tradition. Gandhi spent 5 years when he went back to India to travel India and just learn about India, and he did learn, and we could also learn. So I'm a big enthusiast. I call it door knocking, but of course door knocking can take many forms. It can be you go to workplaces and meet people. You go to your own office and spend time just to understand what people's fears and people's wishes and desires are. So that kind of movement building, I think we have people like me and my friends have spent too little time on this kind of basic movement building, and I see great hope in if we spend more of our best energy on that kind of thing.
What a beautiful thought. Yeah, I mean, and just going out and asking people, what do you think? What is needed in the world now? Yeah, there's so much potential there, and it just requires a little bit of bravery from all of us to go out and knock doors. The Scandinavian in me for the last nearly 26 years now. Yeah, that it's not the easiest thing. We're conditioned to kind of not do that. So that would be a fantastic breakthrough for many people, I think. And maybe what you just said there about door knocking could be part of the answer, or a bit of a comment to a question we've got in the chat there from Peace in Europe. How can we avoid the EU becoming defined by war and militarism? And I just say we've got 4 minutes. So, and there's another question. No, there's a comment. But yeah, that's the question for the last 4 minutes. How can we avoid the EU becoming defined by war and militarism, do you think?
Well, my take on that is that I'm more involved in just trying to make people see what the EU is, and now EU is a machine for deregulation and for authoritarian capitalism and for brutalization of societies. I don't invest hope in reforming the EU. I invest more hope in taking back power to the lower levels, and also to do that in a way which is constantly looking at our global responsibility. So decoupling from that kind of market fundamentalist institution, I think, is more promising than trying to reform that institution. But I also say, if people say, yeah, let's have a referendum on a new EU treaty, or let's develop a new EU treaty and have a referendum on that. Total, what is it called, overhaul of the EU system. Then I'm willing to be part of that campaign as well.
Yes. And as Hilda Johannesson says in the chat, we need to make alliances also to the people on the right. They are more against war than social democrats, at least in Norway. And we see that, conservatives and indeed far right are or say at least that they're against war. And then when it comes to the crunches we see in America, the people are saying that we need to protect ourselves from the government. They're in fact the one cheering on ICE as they shoot people. What you just said, Thomas, would you describe that as a radical localism?
Yes, I would. Yeah, I would.
Yeah.
I want to, and I do think, to go and meet, people who vote for far right, and so many people vote for moderate right, they are not bad people. People are confused, and we are also confused. So we should meet each other in basic appreciation of our common limits in understanding. So that's one thing we can learn not to be presented and seen as people who come on their high heels and lack respect. That's one thing I think we can learn. I also want to say that we also need to be intellectually ambitious, and I do think one project which I also want to flag, which I work on, is to mobilize the people who produce knowledge from the parties, also from universities and from think tanks, etc., to create a comprehensive picture of the attack on the democratic basics and on the rule of law. We have a very comprehensive attack on democracy and rule of law, and we need people who react to different bits and pieces. People react to in Finland, to the onslaught on the rights of disabled. People who react to the attack on trade unions. People who react to attack on culture and academic freedom. But these different fields haven't joined hands, not even at the level of analysis. And I think one thing we also need to do is to claim intellectual leadership and create a picture of take the bits and pieces of the attack on democracy we have, also especially in human rights, in migration policies, but many other things that we also need to develop and present sharp and comprehensive analysis. And I work with this present project I have on the domestic level in Finland, but it should be done at an international level as well. So be humble, knock doors, but also be ambitious intellectually. Both everything's needed.
Everything, everywhere, all at once.
Yes.
Well, radically local and connect ourselves to people both in Africa and our Nordic neighbours. Thomas, thank you very much for all the work you've done to bring you to this point, to be able to deliver with such poise and accuracy and analysis and discussion about where we are right now in the world, in Europe. And we hope to see you here in person next year.
I would love to come. It's much better to be there, and you'll get so much energy and so much also intellectual input and inspiration. So thanks all. This is an important event. Happy to be part of it.
Thank you. And we continue tomorrow at 12:30. Same meeting link. And I'll just take that away. Same meeting link tomorrow at 12:30 och imorgon är vi allting på svenska. So have a wonderful evening, and thank you very much for your participation tonight. We'll see you tomorrow. Take care.